Welcome, everyone, to Exit Philosophy with Mal Ramanan and Griff. And we're recording on Friday morning after a full day of NFL football on American Thanksgiving. What was your day like? I mean, that first game was worth talking about, the game
It
between the,
was.
yeah,
I couldn't have planned my day any better. I watched the first game, prepared for the third game, and designed all my. I had a Christmas dinner to attend, so I designed that around the second game. So, I was very happy to miss the Giants and Cowboys affair, but it's all about that first game, right? The debacle that was. It just kind of seems like another meltdown by the Bears at the end of a game, so to speak, whether it's, performance or coaching or what have you, but that was unprecedented. How do
yeah.
you just stand there and watch the 32 seconds roll off the clock like Eberflus was watching it on TV like we were.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. It's
amazing.
like the clock is on the screen, and I'm sure the coaching staff is watching. And as a friend of mine tweeted, there's not enough room on that charter home for Eberflus and one timeout. And that's the story: is that at some point you got to call that
That's
timeout,
the
whether it's
tipping point is
early
that timeout.
when your rookie quarterback is standing behind the line in shotgun and spending 10 minutes as if he's audible, calling an audible, which he's not. The play was called. He said it after the game, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. And he took too long to get it in, and there's lots of blame to give the quarterback. But at the end of the day, 32 seconds, you use the timeout. There's just no excuse from the head coach. You bring Caleb over, you design a play for him to get at least 5 yards out of that. Obviously, hopefully more because you can use the middle of the field. There's tons of time left. At the same time during the timeout, you get the field goal unit ready. You just says, boys, you're going to have to get on there and just be ready to go. You know what I mean? There's still plenty of time. It's not like you're racing on the field with 2 seconds left. You throw it, you take 10 seconds to run a play, you got lots of time to get the field goal unit on. And you can still run a play designed for the sideline too,
Yeah,
right?
he with 40 seconds left, they were within borderline Santos field goal range, and he got sacked. So
Right.
that put the emphasis on getting a completion to get back into relatively makeable field goal range, and then call your last timeout. But with 16 seconds left, he was in shotgun formation. 16 seconds, one timeout, and you needed another 7 or 8 yards to get in Santos non-blocking field goal range. And,
Right. It's
and
always a
the
concern,
rest, I
but
mean, we all saw it. I left home at halftime to go to the Black Swan because Debbie was watching the dog show to see if a beagle would finally win. And Kramer, our beagle, was sitting there watching with her, and the beagle got crushed.
so
Not even close.
are you telling me otherwise you would not have gone to the Black Swan?
No, well,
Is that what you're saying?
that was as good an excuse as any.
'Cause I'll buy that I'll buy it. But
Okay, good. It was a tougher sell at home.
yeah,
But
right.
yeah, the second game nobody cared about. Really, I don't think anybody cared about the Cowboys unless you're a diehard Cowboys fan facing the Giants with Lockett under center.
Your lock, yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a mortal lock for the Cowboys.
Yeah. I know with Cooper Rush too.
Oh my
So
God,
it
yeah.
really was. So
But and
did
then
you
the night game, you had a comment on the night game about typical Tua. You
well,
know,
it's just, and at the end of the day, this is where you get the discussion where, the diehard defenders of Tua, and I kind of like Tua personally, and like I see where, he has value. But man, stat line looked great. Threw for over 300, 2 TDs, no picks, and he stunk.
yeah.
The game was out of hand early, and they did not even press the whole night. Like there was rarely a time where you're like, well, this is going to be a game. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
There
it's
were,
hard to the narrative. I get if you want to stop the narrative about the cold weather and them playing good teams. You gotta at least compete on that
yeah.
stage, and it's just the same old story for them.
Well, I would say that it's the record of 0-7 for Tua when the temperature is below 45 Fahrenheit. That didn't come into play, although his numbers, which looked pretty good with no interceptions, two touchdowns, were helped by the fact that they were down 24-3 at halftime.
It's how football works, right?
Yeah.
They're going to give you a lot of easy completions over the middle, which they did. Tua was still trying to complete passes with 10 seconds left, and he did. So
Yeah.
did you return home after the dog show, or would you stay to the end of the third game at the?
Well, I was, I forgot about the lack of daylight saving time. And by the time I was ready to go home, it was dark and I had to walk through the woods and I was scared of coyotes. I would have done it, but I didn't
That would
have
have been a
any,
poor choice.
it would have been a poor
The
choice.
area is well known for coyotes.
Oh God, yeah. And I didn't have breadcrumbs to leave a trail. And so Debbie came and picked me up, which was probably the best decision for all.
So basically, it was a win-win for everybody
Oh, good.
yesterday.
So I
Yeah.
managed to watch the last game, most of the last game at home. So the dog show was
Safe,
over. The Beagle
safe.
lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Safe confines of the Griffin residence. Okay. Glad to hear it.
So now we go to baseball news, and of course the biggest news of the week since around MLB was Blake Snell
Yeah.
signing a 5-year deal with the Dodgers. For a competitive amount for a Scott Boras client. But there are some things that sort of make this interesting and of note, and you've got some ideas on that. But mine is that the Boris Dam is breaking early. I think he learned he was sort of taken out behind the shed last year by the
Yeah.
ownership in
Yeah.
collusion,
Yeah. He
and
was.
now he's beginning to unleash his clients earlier.
Yeah. And shockingly, he's going to get the money for them. You know what I mean? Maybe not Jordan Montgomery, but
Yeah,
at the oops. But no, I think you're 100% right. And you know, he's a pretty bright guy. You can say what you want about Boris, but he's got a long history of getting his guys the cash. And I think you're right. I think he's going to get quick to market with the guys he needs to get quick to market too. And we talked about it too. The Soto thing's kind of separate, and I think you'll see that resolved in a relatively quick form. Whatever that means. It's not going deep into the off season, but um, yeah, again back to the Dodgers, right?
yeah,
Here
yeah.
we
Well,
go.
that's the question. Is this because there's been some sentiment that this is bad for the game, that the Dodgers have all this money and people are talking ridiculous theories about a floor and a ceiling when you know that the most powerful union in all of sports, maybe in all of organized labor, isn't going to stand for that.
Well, and nor should they. And see this again, you get these signings, and I get it. Everybody, oh, the Dodgers, here we go, blah blah blah, powerhouse. And 100% right. I understand the concern, but what I always chuckle at is somehow it's bad for the game. But what always makes me laugh, and you see this always, we've been brainwashed to think that competitive balance somehow rests on the labor, on the players. They must be the reason we have competitive balance.
Yeah.
So therefore, we must cap their earnings because, it's like the owners. Boy, they've made all this money and they don't want limits on what they earn and they love a free enterprise system. But God, when it comes to labor,
Well,
all of a sudden they're socialists, Griff. They're
the pl-
socialists.
the
Let's
players
cap
the
earnings.
players, the agents, and the union must love when guys, individual owners like Cohen show up.
Yeah.
And they don't want to get it outbeat. It's all ego. It's all we have this money, we want to spend it, and the rest of the MLB be damned because it doesn't matter. We want to win, and the union and the players and agents are just rubbing their hands, going, "This is great."
Well, but it is. It's called. It's a freer system than any other sport. And as well as I was, when Cohen came in and started just, doing what he does, Manfred was pissed. He wasn't happy about it because that's going to raise salaries across the board. There's no question. The point is they can raise salaries across the board because there's lots of money in the game. And the point is it shouldn't be on labor to restrict what they earn. There are other ways. God forbid you share revenues. God forbid that. I know you can argue it, but the Dodgers and the Yankees don't want to share any more than they do already. But if you're
Well,
truly concerned about competitive balance, there are other ways to do it than just a restriction on salaries. That's,
yeah, and MLB is borderline flaunting any antitrust because basically it's 30 franchises that work for under one umbrella, which is MLB. And they're saying, oh, they're all independently owned. Well, if they're all independently owned, they should be allowed to spend the money that they want on the employees that they think can win them a championship. But
Correct.
if you put a restriction on that, then all of a sudden the anti-monopoly and antitrust comes into play, and they don't want
Yeah.
that at all, you
No,
know.
they don't want that at all. No question.
Although
And
Donald Trump did say that he was not in favor of the new kickoff rules in the NFL, so he's, I heard that on a speech that he gave before the election, and I've
but
gone,
he is in favor of all the billionaire owners that own sports teams and their donations. So
that's
so
right.
there's no concern about the antitrust thing in while
Absolutely.
he's in power. But
So
I
the
mean,
bottom,
I always find that, do the bigger markets have an advantage? Clearly, clearly. Is it the advantage people think it is? It is not. You know, say what you want. Can the Rays and the Pirates spend a lot more than they do? Yes, they can. They choose not to. They choose to take a lot of the dollars that gets transferred from the revenue sharing agreement already and put it in pockets. So,
yeah.
I mean, you could
All
do other things, is what I'm saying. You don't have to, it's just not oh, they need a cap. That's the simple way that fans have been trained to think. And that's the way the owners want you to think. They
yeah.
want you to think it's Dak
And,
Prescott's fault. Well, I mean, it
and
could be Dak
And
Prescott's fault.
the Blue Jays ownership at Rogers is in that same category. They're not an individual owner like Cohen and the Mets. They're a corporate owner, and the only reason they pursued Ohtani last year, and we've discussed it quite often, is because he could have made them revenue to pay for his exorbitant, overpriced
Which
salary,
he's
and they
doing just
didn't.
fine in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, they're putting the
working.
money they made from Ohtani this year into a fund that an interest bearing that'll pay him the deferred down the road, or at least a large portion of it.
Yep.
So, that's an investment. Soto, I don't see as being as much of an investment, especially for a group like Rogers Corp. I mean, Rogers ownership, they wouldn't get the same kickback in
We
other
talked
areas.
about that. It's not
Yeah.
comparable. There's
Yeah.
just there's just no avenue to get the return to getting on
So
Ohtani. But again, like it's just not bad for baseball that the Dodgers, operate the way they do and operate effectively and others don't. And my point is there's other ways to address competitive balance if that's the goal. It doesn't always have to be at the feet of the players. And unfortunately, in major North American sports, that's the way the system's been constructed for a very, very valid reason. And that's the way everybody's been trained and brainwashed to think. And it's rather silly, in my opinion.
yeah, the Dodgers and Yankees pay 26 players like they're starting players. They don't have
Correct.
a bench budget. They have starting players, and that's where the extra money in payroll goes, not to round up all of the top players, but they pay everyone like they're starters. So when they have an injury in the rotation, another guy who's being paid like a starter can step in and into that 3 spot or 4 spot and perform. And that's the difference. I mean, when the Jays start to overspend or to spend and keep up with the big boys on the front line, then their bench becomes worse, worse, and worse.
And let's be honest. Let's talk about the tax that's in place for the payroll has been relatively effective.
Yeah.
That's an avenue I'm talking about. That doesn't necessarily lay at the feet of the players, although it does restrict. It's a restriction, but it transfers money from the rich owners to the lesser
Yeah.
owners, the pirates, etc. So there are other ways to address it. Now, the unfortunate part is what they do when they get those, checks
And
in
then
Pittsburgh.
the bottom line also is, and this has been talked about a lot, is that there's been no repeat winner since the Yankees in 99 and 2000,
I,
But
I think that's
this
more a
year,
reflection.
for the first time, the top three total payrolls in baseball made it to the final four. And that might be an alarm bell that people are looking at is like you can buy your way into the final four. But if the Dodgers do not repeat again next year, which even though they're adding to what they had, it's possible, very possible. History tells you that it is
Well,
happen, but
the way they've developed the system now, I mean, MLB playoffs are a bit, I mean, they're so watered down and a bit of a joke. The reason is so you can, it is you're flipping coins to an extent. You can buy your way into the playoffs now. There's no question. What
Yeah.
happens in the playoffs? I mean, anybody can beat anybody in a short series, and it's designed that way to trick you to thinking they have some parity out there when they don't.
Yeah.
And
When
you know, it's just
when
the way it is.
you're a 500 team at the trade deadline at the end of um, July or August, early August, uh, if you're a 500 team at that point, you feel like you're competing for a playoff spot.
Well, not only do you feel like it, if you get in, you might have a chance to win the World
Yeah.
Series, also known as the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah.
I
And then
mean, we're a
the
500 baseball team going into September, and
Arizona won
Arizona
maybe 4 games, and they
went to
had
the
a
World
World
Series.
Series. Yeah. And then
Nobody's going to
I
tell you they
remember
were a great team.
the Cardinals one year in the Central they were struggling and they won the division with like 82 or 83 wins, and they went deep in the postseason.
So you have to
Yeah.
understand that's how the system is designed. So you can either accept it and enjoy it. You know what I mean? But at least understand, they're looking for the greatest thing in our society. Everything this now has got to be the best. We're all looking for a Cinderella story. So rather than wait for a Cinderella story, why don't we create one? And that's the playoff system. Because
Yeah.
let's increase the chances of, oh my God, can you believe it? Actually,
It-
yeah, I can.
the real Cinderella story to me would have been a beagle winning the dog show, you know?
And you just didn't have the stomach to
Oh
watch that.
man.
No,
So
no.
the Jays still in free agency. You got the Jays reaching out to sign utility man Michael Stefanik, who last year with the LA Angels had 0 home runs, 0 stolen
Sorry, I
bases,
started chuckling right out of the chute
had a
there.
581 OPS.
Right?
So there's a guy who I don't know what it tells you, but it tells me that the Jays are interested in packaging a bunch of guys that they have already that fit that description, mediocre middle infielder, corner infielder type guys. What does it tell
Well,
you about that signing?
well, first of all, I gotta apologize because I said the Jays would have difficulty beating anybody to market, and looky here, they got right after it. So they jumped right out of the gate for Stefani. I mean, I mean, uh, being serious, it's fine. It's a guy. Can you make that assumption you just made? Sure, I guess. They do have a plethora of middle infielders. All of them appear to be better than this young, fine gentleman. So adding to your AAA depth is never a bad thing. Clearly, um, someone likes this style of player and they wanted to get him in and beat people to market on that, and they did. But yeah, I think if you're looking at the Jays and how they can operate and get better quickly, they've got a bunch of guys that fit that category that you can move. Now,
Yeah.
what do you get for them is I mean, you probably value them more than other people at this stage, but somebody might want to take a shot. Again, going back, maybe it's the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's their kind of
Yeah, I
guy.
mean,
A cheap guy
you
with
might get
Josh
a
Horowitz Wagner type.
yeah, you might get a mid-rotation guy that's outpriced himself for a smaller market, or you might get a bullpen guy since they're going to be looking for at least five relievers. And which leads me to the next topic, which is
Maybe a bullpen guy. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and the starter might be an overreach. You
it's a
might
little
include
aggressive.
something else in
Yeah.
there. Yeah. The big news that came after we recorded last week's show was Jordan Romano being non-tendered. It was discussed a lot. I didn't think it would happen, but it did. He was scheduled to make 8 million. We're not sure what the state of his arm is right now. Nobody's really been able to determine that, but obviously the Jays had concerns about that. What were your thoughts when you saw that?
I think, in fairness, I mean, in a perfect world, they need a Jordan Romano. He checks all the boxes, including, him being Canadian from the area, and there's a lot to like there. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they probably know something about his health that alarmed them, and they felt they could use, what is it, $8, $9 million a little more effectively. Hard to argue. Obviously, if it comes back to bite them, you could criticize them then, because they definitely need what he brings to the table. There's no question about it. But I'll give him a break there. I mean, they clearly he's had injury trouble, and to commit, that type of money in your bullpen, they can probably go out and use that on somebody else that maybe they feel they can count on. And it's hard at this stage of the game. It's hard to argue the move. I
Yeah.
mean,
I would like to believe that the Blue Jays front office spoke to Romano with a
well,
potential offer to bring him back on a minor league
absolutely they did.
contract. I mean, it's like gold, that roster spot heading into the Rule 5. And if you don't need to use it on a guy that you've spoken to and said, hey, if your arm progresses, we want to bring you back because you're Canadian, because you've done all this for the franchise, I'll buy into that. I will say that that's a good move. But they have two 40-man roster spots now open, and they haven't moved quickly to fill them. To me, that means that they're interested themselves in using the Rule 5 draft to look for a 97 to 100-mile-an-hour arm that is couldn't survive on a roster of another team. That's my read into that. Not two roster spots, but
No,
one.
no. I'll be shocked if they don't select somebody in the Rule 5 and exactly that guy. They've got the spot. They're in desperate need of the bullpen help. It's a free look at a guy. You don't have to keep him. It's a free look. So why wouldn't you use it and see if that's something you can send him back? There's just, you lose what, $25,000? You know what I mean?
It's
Like,
100 to draft, and you get 50 back
so
if you.
50 was 25 in my day. So
Yeah, right.
sorry.
Old timer.
Inflation works real quick there.
So now we've got with the non-tender list, and every team non-tenders guys the same way that Romano was done. But when you're in a local market, it sometimes has more of an impact and emotional feel than it does everywhere else. But there were a lot of non-tenders this year. 32 of them were relief pitchers, which drives the number of free agent relievers available to 100. There's 100 names on the free agent market, and there's 30 teams. Now, what is your impression of that? I mean, if they act quickly, they can get some decent
Doesn't
pitchers out of there.
doesn't that really tell you about the state of the game too? How little teams value those arms and how disposable they are and how they will spit them out and turn them over because so many exist in that category of throw hard, send you down the river. Who is next? It just kind of tells you where the game is at. Now,
Yeah.
that being said, because you have 100 guys out there, yeah, I think it's imperative when you're rebuilding an entire bullpen. We talked about that like off air. What do they got? Three guys right now that they're bringing
Yeah.
that you
Well, you
count, like
mentioned,
Green, Swanson, and Yariel.
yeah.
So beyond that, you got a bunch of guys that you know
So you need
you've
five
already seen.
relievers, and you don't have anyone. Like, you need a reliever who 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6 times coming out of the pen, you can trust to do the job. And
And
everybody's going to fail at some point, but if it's 1 out of 6, that's acceptable. But the Jays were sending guys out last year. It was a coin flip as to whether they would be able to get the job done. They might have done it the day before, then they come out and it's the day that they're stuck.
100%. Now, this is where making jokes about being quick to market. This is where I think they need to be quick to market. You need to target those two or three, four guys that you definitely want and end up getting two of them. You know what I mean? Get out quick to market. Feel good about building that base. Okay, now we got five relievers. I mean, four if you want to discount Swanson because you're just not sure. But you're bringing him back, but you're not sure what you're going to get. You're never sure, but you feel good about having five guys, and then you can let the reliever market kind of play out. And there's still plenty to pick through. At that point, they're all the same, and
Yeah.
you're okay picking through some guys with lesser price tag. And you've got yourself a reasonably built bullpen for not a lot of money. But I think it's imperative you go quick to market and get your, like you said, Finnegan's, your Tanner Scotts, guys like that, whoever it is,
Yeah.
pick four guys
And
that you
and the
feel
thing
strong
is,
about.
the thing is with all those names and players out there, relievers, long relievers, middle relievers, That's why the salaries for those guys remain so low, is because there's
Yeah.
not, there's a dime a dozen,
It's called
So
supply and
buying
demand, right?
20
Supply and demand.
scratch off tickets at the lotto, each one has the same chance of winning, but maybe one of them will.
Well, some of them do. That's the thing. And you're okay shopping there at the end and picking through it, but you got to go get, you just can't afford to shop entirely in that bargain bin. You got to go get a couple guys out of
Yeah.
the shoe.
Well, I got a couple names to run by you from the non-tender list that might be of interest. And we spoke about the first one. I'll just get your reaction to them. Cal Quantrill was non-tendered by the Rockies.
To me, that's that we've talked about it. I know, whether it's some personal bias, I don't know, but that name stands out as a perfect fit for so many reasons for this club. He's that starter you want at the back end. He's reliable. He eats innings. He's a sinker ball guy who knows how to pitch. He's pitched in Colorado relatively effectively. You know, he's been a star in Cleveland. Obviously, he's had a year where it wasn't so good either. But you now that he's non-tendered, I mean, just go get him. It's such a smart depth piece for a reasonable amount of money. I don't know how you feel, but to me, and then the history with he'd be such a hit here. He's an
Yeah.
intelligent kid, speaks
Oh,
well.
he's great.
I mean, oh my God, like there's just no downside to me. Like
Yeah.
you just got to go
And,
get him.
and it was his final year of arbitration. He was scheduled to make 9 million in arbitration, which was too pricey. And besides, it's a definite handicap pitching
Oh,
in
he's so happy to get out of there.
because it's not the home runs. It's the fact that the outfield area is so deep and the outfielders are forced to play deep that you get more flares dropping in. You get
Or
more,
doubles.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you get more stats that make you look bad as a starting pitcher. And he's better than what he showed in Colorado. And a
He was
lot of
good
guys who
there.
pitch out there are. So
He was good there.
yeah.
So to me, it's
Yeah,
a
he was
close
almost an
decision.
all-star the first half, right? This
Yeah,
year.
and
Yeah.
it stops people from talking negatively about Romano. You got your new
Right.
Canadian.
Right. There you go.
Let's
That's
go.
reason number two.
Yeah, yeah.
How about Austin Hayes? I mean, every time he faced the Blue Jays as a member of the Orioles, he just killed them. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, he won't be able to play against them anymore if he's signed to Toronto.
Maybe that's why you can't sign him.
What's your impression of him?
I think he'd be a guy that you could resort to if you don't get the stuff you want. You know what I mean? Like he's definitely a tier two kind of signing. Would it be the worst thing in the world? No. And I'm sure the price tag would reflect that. I mean, he's kind of oops, we lost out on the stuff we really wanted guy. And you not saying it's, he can't produce for you. I think it's something again that's not what you race the market for. You know what I mean? You kind of
Yeah.
let that kind of stuff play out. And if it's something that works out because, you've gone another direction with your spend, maybe, you've used your dollars on a third baseman, let's
Yeah.
say that's out there like a
Like
Bregman.
your Bregman choice. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Would be
then
your
maybe you
guy.
go, hey, let's go get Austin Hayes and fill
Yeah.
in the gaps there. Sure.
And that brings me to my third guy, and then we'll move on to GMs and their
Yeah.
history with free agents. Um, Second baseman Brendan Rodgers from the Rockies again. He's had a couple of good years. He's a proven major league player, but I think you would only need to get him a guy like that if you were planning on packaging some of those guys that we talked about that are on the Blue Jays roster that had impressive half major league seasons. And to me, a guy like Barger might be really attractive to another organization who doesn't see him play every day, but sees his arm and sees his power and his ability to play right field and throw guys out from right field and his ability to box ground ball, maybe not so much boxing ground balls at third base, but
Remove that from the
the
hype
arm
video.
and
The
the
hype
arm and the
video
raw
will not have that.
power he might be the most interesting for another team looking at the Blue Jays and saying, "Hey, let's grab that guy."
He's exactly the type of guy, it's the tools he got. That's what interested the Jays about Loperfido. Let's be honest. You're talking, the power, the speed, those types of things. So absolutely somebody would like to get that in there. And hey, let's go back. Sometimes those things do work out, Griff. Um, That's called a Teoscar Hernandez. He had
Yeah,
those same concerns coming over from Houston. You're like, I can remember some very respected people I know going, he can't play though. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
he's got enormous power, so many holes in his game, and his enormous power became so good that
That's
he
like, and
overlooked those things.
again, it's funny you mentioned that because that makes me think of Jose Bautista when they brought him in.
Sure.
Like he was a guy who had been with maybe four or five different organizations and never been able to find a spot, never been able to find a role. And then he ends up batting leadoff for the Jays in a year where he ends up with 54 home runs or whatever he had.
Yeah. So
So
you'd have
they
stuck
didn't
him
know
up
what
there.
they had until it hit them in the face.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there is reason because those tools are special. I'll tell you who doesn't have those tools, all those middle infielders. And I'm not saying like so when you're looking, you're 100% right. If I'm another GM, I'm looking to say, you know what, I'd take a chance on Barger before I take a chance on, one of the other guys. You're like, he's coming with me because I want to get him into my program and see if we can do something because if it hits, it's special.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you got to use that.
Well, speaking of a ceiling for a lot of the guys that are currently on the roster, like it's hard for me to believe that Dana Brown, the GM of the Astros, would get hornswoggled as badly as people are saying he is by including Jake Bloss, who was supposed to come up and be able to show in September what he could do with the Blue Jays. He never earned that promotion.
Right,
He wasn't just given it, he didn't earn it.
right,
Then Loper Fido, whose warts showed in all the times that he got to play every day. And then Will Wagner. That's three decent minor league players who have yet to prove that the fans of the Blue Jays who are going, oh boy, did we ever pull one over on them? 10 starts for Kikuchi. Well, who went to the playoffs?
right.
Um, so, like, these guys really have to prove something that they're beyond just mediocre major league players. I don't think Will Wagner has a defensive ability at this point to be a
No,
starting
he
major
doesn't.
league second baseman.
He doesn't. Like, let's be honest. You know what I mean? Now, can he improve on that? Sure. But here's the real issue. You usually make those types of trades when you're a second division club, and maybe the Jays are a second division club,
Well,
but
yeah, 74 wins.
currently they are.
Yeah,
They aspire quickly to be, in the mix for a wild card, goalpost moved, but they aspire to that. You cannot run those guys out there. You may be one of those guys. Like Loperfido, if he's on the roster, he's probably up and down as a fourth outfielder. I'm not sure that's wise for him, you know. So you're going to run if you don't trade them. My guess is you're going to run one of Wagner or Horwitz out at second base. You're going to take a hit defensively for sure. Your middle
yeah,
infield is not exactly the Kevin Gosman's not going to be so happy with that one.
yeah.
Or, you know,
Well, yeah, definitely. And that's what has made this starting rotation maybe a mirage of how good they really are because for the last two seasons, the Blue Jays defensively have won the team gold glove or whatever, and they've made a ton of great plays, especially in the
sure,
outfield. And
sure.
and maybe a settling of the defense would settle your top three in the rotation. And you go, what happened to these guys? Well, what happened to these guys is that instead of guy crashing into the center field wall and making a spectacular catch, the ball hit off the wall and continued an inning that resulted in three or four runs. And it's as simple as that. It's not a player taking a downslide. It's moments in time within a game that determine that sort of thing. And the Jays can't afford to put some of these young guys out there if it's going to happen more often than it is right now.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing. Like regardless, Bo is your shortstop. Let's face it. And I'm a big proponent of Bo. I love him, but he's an average shortstop. Like we're like, you know what I mean? So you're gonna run Will Wagner out there or even Horwitz. I mean, you're just not strong up the middle on any level. So that is something you've got to consider. When you're thinking about how the makeup of the club. And also determines what you're going to run out of their third base too, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Vladdy's
Well,
competent
they need
first.
they need uh, they need one corner outfielder. These are significant upgrades that they need. One corner outfielder, either second or third base, and they need a second catcher who can handle 70 starts and won't be there just as a filler.
And I was going to make that point. They need to go get that guy who's a defensive catcher. I mean, you go get a Higashioka, and obviously he's going to run into a bunch for you that are a lot of bonuses for you.
Yeah.
But who cares? Make sure that second guy is a top-notch defender. That's so important for the construction of that club. No
Yeah.
question.
All right. I got general managers through the years and the number of free agents that they signed during their tenure. I'll go down the list chronologically. Pat Gillick, 17 years, 19 free agent signings. Gordas, 7 years, 35 free agent signings. JP Ricciardi, 8 years, 30 free agent signings, 21 of them mediocre white guys. Alex
Wasn't there an
Anthopoulos,
article written about that one?
Alex Anthopoulos, 10 years, 15. I don't think he was there 10 years. 15 free agent signings. And Ross Atkins going into his 10th year, 35 free agent signing. So the guys, and we discussed it a little bit, but the guys who signed the fewest free agents, Gillick and Anthopoulos, have actually been the two best GMs. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's very telling, honestly. And I think that when you sit back and think about how rosters are constructed and just the landscape of payrolls, it makes a lot of sense. The free agent market, you probably disagree with me a bit on this, but I mean, there's always the thought of a Blue Jay tax. I personally don't believe there's one at all. But there's a free agent tax. Free agency by its nature with supply and demand means you must overpay, generally speaking. If, for a quality player, there's just less supply and more demand. So if you're living in that free agent world, how many times do we look at contracts that are signed for players that are probably past their best before date, or heading there quickly, and you've got to in order to get them into the fold, Ryu, Springer, anybody. I'm not like Russ Martin. I don't care who signed them and when they signed them. You've got to overpay. So it's not a surprise that those that do their work with farm systems, homegrown talent, and most importantly, you mentioned this before, trades. Those that are most creative with trades have a leg up. That being said, the Gillick years, there was very little reason for him to jump into free agency. Yeah. But teams do. Teams panic. That tells you how good a GM Gillick was. I mean, the team was nowhere near competing. So he was in the formative building an organization, stocking. He was more the Rule 5 guy because you could take advantage of that back then.
Oh, he had a lot of those picks, yeah.
I mean, what was his nickname, right? Stan Pat.
That was a nickname. As the Expos PR guy, Bob Elliott, called me from the Sun and said, Pat Gillick hasn't made a move in like 2 years. What's a good nickname? I said, how about Stan Pat?
Did you say that? Was that you?
Yeah. Sorry, I apologize.
That's outstanding. Well, I mean, give credit where it's due. I mean, and it stuck. But he was Stan Pat until he wasn't. And he wasn't when it was time to strike. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, but
he might be the best GM of all time.
Trades were his key. I mean, that trade with the Padres helped both teams, and that's very rare, we get Robbie and Carter, and they get what they need, and all of a sudden, wow, they win 2 World Series,
But in hindsight, too, it's very telling that those who don't live in the free agent world have more success. And they have more success because they don't need to. Like, let's be honest, this year, if we want to talk about where the Jays are at, regardless of whether you want to discuss why, they just are where they are. They're going to have to live in that free agent world. And it's a position you don't want to be in. You never want to be in this position because you're at the mercy of. So my big thing is I'd love to get Bregman, understanding that if they get Bregman, they're signing another Springer deal. They're overpaying.
I have 2 points with that. 2 points in response to that. One is that I think that anyone with the Blue Jays or in a similar situation that has to overpay to attract people, the overpay is not in average annual value. The overpay is in term and adding another year because they don't
Right.
want to screw the rest of the major league teams by setting a bar higher in AAV. They would
Right.
rather just add a year they know is going to be like iffy, dicey, 10% chance he's going to pay off.
We'll deal with that later.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And a lot of them are going, well, I know I'm not going to be here as GM when this comes due, so screw it. Yeah.
100%.
And the other thing
100%.
about getting back to the Dodgers and the strength of their organization and the strength of their farm system, when you think about it, when they have the ability to sign major league players as starters that are on their bench, that means the players that should have been on the bench are in the minor leagues, maybe outplaying the AAA level, but there's no room in the major leagues for them
Mhm.
because this team is hell bent on winning a World Series again. So
Correct.
the impression of the farm system is look at all these guys that are down there. What a great farm system.
And
When
it
in
is
fact
great.
they're suppressing the talent that should be in the major leagues, and they package them like Verdugo and a bunch of guys like that who are sent somewhere else to bring back more established major leaguers. So, I'm not like putting the Los Angeles Dodgers scouting system at the top of the heap. I'm just saying
No.
that circumstances allow you to do that, and it makes your farm system look better than maybe it is.
Yeah, but they at least have the guys. I mean, first you have to pick the guys.
Yeah,
They
that's
have to actually
true.
be good. There are
Yeah.
some organizations who just don't have them, even though there's plenty of room for them to rise. They
Yeah.
just don't exist.
Yeah. Like
And
the Jays bench was arguably the worst bench in baseball by the end of last year.
and it was. And unfortunately, I mean, it's just scouting I mean, you can talk about it forever. A lot of it is to being fortunate. I mean, they haven't done well, so it's hard not to criticize it. But there are some level of it that is just being fortunate too. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
a lot of unknowns with young ball players, and that's that things change. And that's where we're going back to talking about bringing guys in with toolsy guys. They're not who they are at 22. They guys can improve. That's why I have coaches and great training facilities and analytics guys. Guys, Teoscar can improve his pitch selection, which makes him more dangerous. It happens. So
Yeah.
you can't just
Well,
decide who a guy is and just that's the end of it. It's
you
not like
said you said a key phrase there, a complete unknown. I thought that was a movie about the Blue Jays farm system, but it's about Bob Dylan. I'm going to take Debbie there on Christmas Day. So,
I
uh,
mean, it can apply to a lot of things, Greg.
can apply to a lot of
A
things.
great phrase.
Um, so now I've got a top five list of Ross Atkins free agent signings through the years from 2016 on. And
Is
I'll
there
run them
five?
by you. Top five.
There
He's
is five?
19. Oh no, it's signed 35. So we'll give him top
No,
five
for
out of
sure. For
30.
sure.
Number five, and you can comment on all of these one by one. I'm going to count down. So number five, I got
This is
Robbie Ray.
this is exciting. We're gonna down to number one. I
Yeah,
can't wait to
yeah,
hear
yeah.
this one.
Keep people on the edge of their seat.
Great signing. I mean, it's hard not to give Mr. Pete Walker a lot of credit there. I mean, when he came over, I'm like, well, probably you can't throw strikes. At the end of the day, it's going to kill him. And again, just to what I was saying, wasn't it? I mean, you decide who a guy is from his resume, and he could never put it together. Again, Toolsy is Toolsy. He's the guy you sell out for with the stuff. But the stuff was, not in the zone enough, and they turned that into a Cy Young. I mean, hats off to Pete Walker on that one, and I mean, just tremendous work there. I can see why he's on the list for sure.
Yeah.
Great
And
signing.
in fact, Robbie Ray is an example of why this Jays group could probably roll the dice on somebody whose whip was too high because of control and command and bring him in with a live arm, 97 to 100 or 95 to 98. But the Pete Walker factor, to me, the ability that they showed with Robbie Ray to convert him into a Cy Young winner, it would encourage them to take a chance on someone wild thing that is around baseball and available.
Yeah.
Um, Number 4, I got Marcus Simeon.
Short tenure.
Yeah,
Um, couldn't play much better. That's for
yeah.
sure. So, I mean, did that dissuade you from? I mean, I trying to recall who else they could have you could have put on this list. But I mean, for a one hit wonder, so to speak, 1 year. So great. I mean, the perform that offense. This it's depressing when you think of that team and the offense that they put out that year. I mean, that's a legit offense, and it's all gone. I mean,
Yeah.
he was
I,
tremendous.
I think that what he contributed to that single season showed what this Blue Jays team could do offensively with the right parts. And getting him to move from shortstop to second base was a tremendous accomplishment. I think they thought they could sign him to a long-term deal when they acquired him, but he made a decision, went to the Rangers, and they've already won a World Series with him there. But that's a case of rolling the dice, seeing if you can re-sign somebody. They got him for a year, and he came through 100% of what they were
He
expecting, and
was
maybe even
everything you
more.
dreamed of.
Yeah.
Everything you dreamed of for a season.
So number 3 could be controversial here because I got George Springer as my number 3, and he could be
Wow.
on a lot of people's top
Worst
5
list,
worst signing.
right?
But
Well,
I put him on the best signings.
here's the case of everything we were just talking about living in the free agent world. He literally is both, Griff. His first couple years, tremendous signing, exactly what they needed. Gamer, center fielder, and he's going to end up the last couple of years on the worst list, where you're living with a guy who needs to hit in the 8 hole. Still a gamer, but you can live with a guy like that if you have all the other pieces around. So I see why you put him on the list. Um, right, I might have put him fifth, but 3 is aggressive. But I get it. Like again, they went out and paid him where nobody else was even close.
Yeah.
Nobody else, but again talk
But
about free agency.
that's
That's not the Blue Jay tax.
the
That's the free agency tax. You know
yeah,
what I
and
mean?
that's what we were talking about, having to add term in order to reach an agreement. It wasn't the average annual value. Other teams may have matched it, but not the length of the contract for a guy that I think he had a couple of injuries when he was with the Astros, but he was a World Series MVP, and that carries a lot of weight when you're trying to sell the brand, the Blue Jays brand, to other free agents. You say, we brought in George Springer, look at us, you know?
And I got a feeling in this case, I don't know for sure. There wasn't 1 year. It was a couple of extra years that
Yeah,
turned
yeah,
the tables.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
quite logical. Yep.
yeah. So I see why he's on the list, but that's kind of funny. I think he'll end up being on both lists if that makes any sense. Because
Yeah, he is.
or
He's
he could
on both
be.
my lists.
He could be at the, I think, he's also the type of guy, some guys can
Yeah, it's like
adjust a little bit as they age and learn to adapt their swing and become still solid hitters.
yeah.
Because he's going to give you everything he's got out there in right field, and
It's
so
like going hunting for great white whales and coming back with an albatross, you know? That's my literary
is
background
that
here.
is that what it's like?
Yeah, that's what it's like.
I,
Uh,
I was thinking exactly that. Yeah.
all right, number 2, I've got Kevin Gosman.
Great signing. I mean, and again, here we go with the back end of the deal, but still appears to be an extremely useful pitcher. And nobody would be surprised if he ramped it back up a little bit for another year. There are obviously signs of decline with the velo, and I think he started the year off with an injury. Those are just things that you expect at his age and where they're at, but. Just a great signing. I mean, he's the type of guy at the back end, I think is still serviceable as time moves on, and you're not going to rue the day you made the signing. Second on the list. I mean, is there what's to argue?
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think
other than the expense at some point, right?
definitely he was at the head of the rotation when Barrios was struggling. He was at the head of the rotation his first year there, and continues to be and the thing about the Blue Jays looking for another starting pitcher, maybe a mid rotation guy or even a top of the rotation guy. They mentioned Luis Severino, and there are other guys out there. We were talking about Cal Quantrill, but somebody, because what are the odds that the same three guys, Bassett, Berrios, and Gosman, are going to go 30 to 33 starts for a fourth straight year? That's
Almost
yeah.
impossible. Like it's almost a zero.
Yeah. So you
That's
need to get insurance, and even with my plan that I sent to Pete Walker about a six-man rotation. So if
I'm
there's
sure
a
he loved
six-man
that.
rotation, yeah, he did.
Oh, okay.
He was
Hey,
in the Caribbean somewhere on vacation. He said, "I'll look at it later."
look
But
at it.
that's like a yes to me.
That was a stamp of approval. The email got opened.
Right. So now number one on my list, and this
There's
is
just another point too with Gosman.
yeah.
If things went sideways, unless it went with him, he's a guy you can move. Like he'd be in demand
Oh,
even
definitely.
at his.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying. So it's not like you're just stuck with the guy.
Yeah.
He's definitely somebody would want that at a deadline type thing.
Unlike a Springer situation, because he's
Right.
still got years left. Even if at a deadline somebody said, "Well, we need a defensive guy that we can put in the eight hole and that can contribute every now and then they go, "Oh, well, you got 2 more years after that." They go, "Oh, never mind."
Oh,
Yeah, never mind.
you got anybody else over there?
Right, low perfido.
Right.
So number one is going to cause some discussion. Hyunjin Ryu is my number one Ross Atkins free agent signing because let me explain
Hey,
before
you see my face?
because it changed the direction of what the Blue Jays were looking like. They had pointed when they took over and then they got rid of the previous version of a winning Blue Jays team, the 2015-16 team, and Shapiro and Atkins got rid of that team and had to build on their own. They were pointing to 2021 as a competitive year, and they signed him over the holiday season in 2019 in time for the 2020 season, which we were at spring training and there were South Korean biographers and teams and documentarians and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit and it all got shut down. But he performed that year, finished third in the Cy Young voting in a short season. They made the playoffs a year ahead of schedule. But to me, one of the more important things is it normalized relationships with Scott Boras, who is arguably, not arguably, who is the most influential agent in baseball.
I will accept all of those things, and there's no question that's the reason they signed him. It was to establish themselves with Boris again, even though everybody knew his arm was about to fall off. They just didn't know what that date was. This message of self-destruct, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. You know, yes, and they made the playoffs a year early, as a very wise man pointed out to us the other day. They did so with a 32-28 record over the pandemic. So it's
Yeah.
not like, they were very Detroit Tiger-esque at the moment, but he was the reason. There's no question. He was very, very good and a pure joy to watch pitch. He was a pitcher. But after that, the arm fell off. You know what I mean? So I agree with everything you said there. So I mean, if you want to put him number one, yeah, all right. I mean, sure. I think right. I think the reason he's number one has nothing to do with his performance, really. You know what I mean? And they got the year out of him to really put them a bit on the map, and maybe that led to other guys coming, for sure. And that was the goal. So on that level, I'll give you that. Mission accomplished, and they needed to establish themselves with Boris. They just did. I mean, he was persona non grata with this organization for a long time for
And the other way around.
silly reasons, for really silly reasons, to be honest. What's that?
And the other way around also. The
Well,
Jays
yeah.
were persona non grata with him.
Well, for sure. If you're not in the market, that's one less,
Yeah.
tool he's got to use for sure.
But
And he
when
made it very
when
public. He
when
made it well known.
Anthopoulos was there, he was clearly able to use them as a mystery team, the Blue Jays as a mystery team, because Alex would never confirm or deny, because that just gave too many clues to media. And
Yeah.
so he wouldn't comment on anything. And Boris, even though he was never negotiating with the Jays at any
You know,
point
they
to use
never
him as a
spoke.
mystery team. Right.
Never.
You know he doesn't like baseball? Oh no, sorry, that's someone else.
That's right.
So
Yeah. All
before we
right.
move
All right. I'll
on,
give you that one. I'll give you that.
all right. So, but as number one or in the top
No,
five?
it wouldn't have been on my list as number one, but I completely understand and I'll accept your argument. You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
it passes the test.
yeah. I mean, as you know, I'm someone who believes in the outreach of certain moves that every move is a pebble in the pond and the ripples reach far and wide.
Well, if
Might
there's
touch a
anything
frog
you're
that
built,
wasn't interested before, you know?
you are about narratives, Griff. There's no question. I mean,
One more before we get to NFL picks. Former free agent signed by Ross Atkins, Yusei Kikuchi, just signed a 3-year deal, $63 million with the Los Angeles Angels, run by another ex
yeah,
Blue
Perry,
Jays assistant GM, Perry Manasian.
correct.
So what's your idea on what that means to the market and what that means for Kikuchi? Did he deserve that?
Did he deserve it? Wow. In this, yeah, it's 3 years. Sure, he did. Of course, he did. He. I mean, he was another guy. There you go, like Robbie Ray. That exact kind of same issues, right? Stuff, and his command would desert him, and he never developed. And then, you can argue there's been guys that came over that didn't pan out. So I don't want to make Pete Walker sound like he's, Mel Stottlemyre times 10. Not that even that's a fair comparison, but Pete's great at what he does. So another guy that turned his career around, and then you cannot argue what he did down the stretch with Houston in really high leverage situations. So absolutely he deserved it. Now, do you want him to be the top of your rotation? No. like, like, and that I think the Angels. We talk about the Angels. I mean, like, there's running out signing Kyle Hendricks and Kevin Newman types, and I just cannot for the life of me. That just seems to be where do they swim in all the time, and that's a tough place to be. So I'm happy for the guy. I think he does deserve that kind of deal. It's not a killer deal if he's not, like lights out. It's 3 years. Um, I think it's a good move for
Yeah.
the Angels.
I
It's
think
like
I
an
think
actual legit starting pitcher.
Yeah. I think Boris, in terms of Kikuchi, can set the bar for that type of starting pitcher, free agent starting pitcher. And the thing about Otani last year and Soto this year is it's not setting any bar. It is the ceiling.
Yeah,
Those two guys were so unique in their market that it didn't matter when they signed. It wasn't going to affect
yeah. They're
others.
the unicorns.
Yeah.
They're
And
the
so
unicorn.
I hate that word, but you can use it if you want. That's fine. I never used it ever in a column. I never used it
No,
any.
why?
I've
What's
never
wrong with
used
it?
it. I just don't like it.
Is
I
it
knew a
like low
unicorn.
hanging fruit?
Yeah, yeah.
I've,
That's
I've got I've got to be better, is what you're saying.
but
All right.
the
Duly
you
noted.
say
Duly
the you
noted.
say contract sets the bar for all sorts of you can include Severino, you can include guys in that bracket. Um, but I think that it's not fair to Pete Walker and the Blue Jays coaching staff to say that, oh, when he got to Houston, they changed things around and they made him
Right.
so much more effective as a pitcher because he had some great outings that were spoiled by one inning later on or early or whatever. His stuff was outstanding
It
with the
is.
Blue Jays,
It is.
but there was always a moment in time where he would give up two or three, and it could have been the result of an error, could have been the result of a bad pitch decision or whatever. But to say that the Astros saved his career is bullshit.
Well, it's a small sample. Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
10
Um,
starts.
so he probably is what he is as a Blue Jay. That's probably what the Angels are going to get,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, that's the price you pay for that these days. Like it just is, and it's not like you said. It's not 5 years. It's not 6 years. It's. I'd sign a guy like that all day long for 3 years for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, absolutely. That brings us to our finale, which is the weekly NFL. NFL picks. I was one and
Sneaking
two.
up on you.
I was 1-2 last week. What were you?
2-1.
2-1.
Think
So now you're 9-9, and I'm 11-7.
is that what it
So it's
is?
still pretty good. 9-9, 11-7. And we got three more. Unfortunately, I had all three games on Thursday. I would have had them right, which is a
You
lie.
are so living in the tout world, past posting, like you are the king. Yeah, no question.
No
Strangely
question.
enough, I felt like I did too. In
So,
hindsight, I
so
did
let's
like
look
the
at
Bears to cover in hindsight.
let's look at Sunday's slate and who you got as your number one. We'll take turns here.
I've written down three that I like, and I've taken a chance on all three of mine are road teams, just for the record. So
Hmm.
I'm going to start with the Arizona Cardinals going into Minnesota, getting 3.5. Um, I, I, I mean, feels like a spot where Minnesota should come home and take care of business. And I just think that Cardinals are plucky and playing for something. And that defense, while not overly talented, plays so hard. I think it's going to be one of those field goal games. So I'm just gonna roll with the Cardinals here and Kyler Murray.
I am going with one of my favorites, and you know it, the Commanders minus 5.5 against the Tennessee Titans. And Tennessee pulled a surprise last week. The Commanders have lost three games that they should have won, and they won one they should have lost. But if they're going to be a playoff team in a weak division, other than the Eagles, then they need to win convincingly against the Titans, and I think they'll do it.
Well, for the second week in a row, we are going head to head because
Uh-oh.
I've got the Tennessee Titans plus 5.5. And if last week's any indication, my Miami Dolphins certainly took care of your New England Patriots there when we went head to head. So,
Yes.
so I'm hoping we got a repeat. I don't think Washington can blow anybody out at this stage. I think they've got, a lot. I mean, dude, should they win the game? Yes. But Tennessee is not a zero, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to cause some problems for Jaden Daniels, and I'm expecting this. I think your assessment is right. If Washington wants to be a playoff team,
Yeah.
I just don't see that the answer might be no. So I'm banking on that. So head to head again, Griff. Week
My
two.
my second choice is the downtrodden Jets plus 1.5 against the
Ooh,
Seahawks.
wow. What's the what? Let's hear the handicap there.
I believe that the whenever a New York team, well, excluding the Giants on Thanksgiving Day, but whenever a New York team is counted out, especially with a guy like Aaron Rodgers around, and like to me, this is a moment for them to step up. I'm not a big Geno Smith fan on the road. I just think that this is the moment for the Jets to show that they are mediocre, not horrible.
I mean, that's all they can aspire to at this. They could put a banner up for that.
Yeah, so I
We are
got
not horrible.
Jets.
We are not horrible.
Yeah, the elephant man of the NFL.
Right, right, right.
I am not
That
a
is,
monster.
that is a
So that's
very
I got Commanders and Jets.
that's a very bold move. I respect that a lot. My
And you
last
got
one,
Cardinals and Titans.
yeah, my last one is going to be the Indianapolis Colts minus 2.5 going to New England. I'm still going to fade the Patriots. I even last week I do like Drake May, uh, and I that worries me. But I think the Colts kind of righted themselves in a sense that you can see with Richardson, there's a bit of a change there, and um, I think they just win the game. Like I just think they're just that much better and better coached and everything. So I'm going to take them on. That's three road teams for me. So Indy minus 2.5.
My last one, and then we'll wrap it up, is the Eagles plus 3 at the Ravens. It's a
I
bus
like that
ride.
too. I almost
Bus
took that.
ride, for God's sake. From Philly
Right.
to Baltimore is, and you got the best running back to me in each conference facing each other, and the best quarterback. I mean, arguably facing each other.
Yeah.
It's similar
Yeah.
offense,
Yeah.
but I think the Eagles are on a heater that will not stop this week. The Ravens seem to lose games where they at the end of the game you look and say, how did they lose that? I think this will be one of those. And with the Eagles getting points, I'll take
I
them.
I
Baltimore.
almost did that one too, and I'd be stunned if Baltimore rolled them, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
Eagles are looking solid, and I mean, it's going to be a great game to watch for sure.
Yeah.
I like that one a lot. So yeah, I'm with you on that one.
All right. Well, that's
It's
we
one
go
of
head
my
to head
lean.
in one. Yeah. So one of us will go 3-0 and one will go 2-1. So
That's right. That's right. That's right.
so stick with us on that. Anyway,
Yeah.
this wraps up this week's Exit Philosophy, and thanks Mal for joining me for co-hosting. And if you need to get past episodes of Exit Philosophy, they're available on griffstopitch.com. All my columns that have posted, and a new mailbag is starting up, a new old mailbag. So if you have any questions, you can send them to at our Griff Baseball, which is either Blue Sky or X. It's the same name on both. Send me a question, and every Friday I'll try and answer it. Maybe Friday afternoon, and it'll be some interesting reading over the course of the weekend. So I've always enjoyed that aspect of it when I was with the Star, and it was very popular. I think I outdrew Ellie's sex tips at the Star, so I got that going for me.
Not because of me.
Uh,
Well done. Well done, Griff.
so yeah, that wraps up this episode, which I believe is 46 for the year. And thanks, Mal, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.